discovered the covert trip to Hawaii that my wife had taken with her lover. I then hid Diogzes in their luggage, informed the Drug Enforcement Administration, and watched as they were taken into custody at the airport. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison while he was given 15. Our alarm clock did not go off since there was a power outage overnight, which caused the morning to be a complete and utter chaos. This meant that my wife and I needed to get ready for work as quickly as possible. The fact that my employment begins at 9 in the morning and that it is only a 15-minute drive from our house meant that she was in a greater rush than I was. It is customary for my wife to check her email before leaving for work, however. She was in a hurry and failed to remember to turn off her computer. At the very moment that I was going to switch it off, I became aware of an email that she had received a few days earlier with the subject line "Aloha to a wonderful time." After allowing my curiosity to get the better of me, I opened it, only to find out that my wife was making plans to travel to Hawaii with another man while I would be away on a business trip that would last for 2 weeks. I was taken aback by this information, and it left me feeling utterly crushed. All right, let me give you some background. My wife, Kathy, and I were introduced to each other by our common acquaintances more than a dozen years ago. They considered us to be a good match. As it turned out, we both placed a high priority on maintaining a healthy lifestyle and being physically fit. Despite the fact that I have a passion for the outdoors and have been working toward a job in marketing at a medium-sized firm with the goal of expanding my business, I frequently participate in activities such as jogging, mountain biking, and hiking. We had a lot of interests in common and looked nice together as a couple. Having a height of 5 feet and 6 inches, Kathy possesses long brown hair, brown eyes, and a beautiful shape. I have blonde hair, blue eyes, and a physique that is sporty. I am 3 feet and 3 inches tall. Was it love at first sight that it was? Not at all, but we did create a solid friendship that eventually turned into a romantic one. It was necessary to wait a few years. But in the end, we decided to get married, and up until this point, I thought that we were content with our lives. On the other hand, after reading this email, I became aware that our marriage was experiencing significant difficulties. Since quite some time ago, it would appear that Kathy and this gentleman Gary had been covertly organizing a romantic holiday on their own. She went on with the trip, despite the fact that she was aware of my planned business trip, which was a huge opportunity for both the firm and for me particularly. I was getting ready to embark on a business trip with a few colleagues to secure major deals that would last for 2 weeks. Obtaining these arrangements could result in a promotion, as well as a significant increase in compensation. I was only able to concentrate on this email that was in front of me at this moment. I began to investigate her other emails in order to acquire additional information regarding Gary. Unbeknownst to her, she had meticulously organized all of their letters under the heading of excursions. Isn't that so convenient? Kathy is not very knowledgeable about technology, but I spend a lot of time on computers, so I had no trouble going around the page. It was obvious that she had been in a relationship with this individual for the past half a year. But why is that? There were no evident indications of discontent that I could observe. Our time spent in bed was enjoyable, and we took pleasure in each other's presence. In what way did she find herself in the arms of another man? My thoughts were flying out of control, but I had to get to work. Before I left, I made sure to download all of the emails onto a USB drive so that I could look at them later and possibly learn more about Gary and the reasons why she did this. I was preoccupied with thoughts of her and Gary as I hurried off to work after she had finished shutting down her computer. During the time that I was processing the shock of this news, fury began to boil up inside of me, and I yearned for a massive amount of revenge. Generally speaking, I am not one to resort to violence or seek retribution, but this particular circumstance was different. This was an inexcusable act on her part. I contemplated for a moment when it all started, but ultimately determined that it was irrelevant. On the other hand, I was interested in finding out more about Gary and figuring out how I might make his life unlivable. Despite the fact that I entertained the idea, I did not intend for him to suffer any damage. As an alternative, I desired for both of them to be humiliated in front of a large audience. On the other hand, I was still required to carefully plan. As I had 6 weeks ahead of me, I shut the door to my office at work and began to think of ideas. Regarding Gary and the particulars of their journey, I required additional information. A thought occurred to me about how I could thwart their objectives and bring their affair to light in a manner that she would be unable to refute. Despite the fact that it was a daring strategy, I was resolute in my intention to force her to face the consequences. Over the course of the day, I was able to accomplish a significant amount of work. And yet, my thoughts kept going back to the plan I had devised. When it was time for me to depart, I remained in my office for more than an hour, taking notes on what I required and an explanation of how I could acquire it. In addition, I made a note of the dangers that it entailed. In the event that things went awry or I was discovered, I could be in substantial difficulty, and I might even be sentenced to jail time. With that being said, I was willing to take the risk. I was aware that I required access to Kathy's computer and email in order to acquire additional information about Gary. Downloading software to crack her passwords was something I considered doing, but I quickly understood that doing could leave a digital trail behind. It was imperative that I exercise caution if I wanted to successfully pull this off without being discovered, so I had to figure out a way to get what I wanted without leaving any traces that may be traced back to me. Over the course of the following few days, I went to a number of different retailers and paid with cash for a few disposable cell phones. Additionally, I purchased a tiny laptop that I could use at locations that offered free Wi-Fi. My acts would not be able to be traced back to either my place of employment or my residence. In addition, I went out and bought a number of wireless video cameras and bugs to be placed all over the home in the hopes of catching her bringing this a hole into our bed for some adulterous fun. However, it was possible that they might discuss their future trip, which would provide me with the information I required for my plan. The prospect made my blood run cold. After some time had passed, I made it a point to maintain a normal demeanor around my wife in the hopes that she would not realize that I was aware of her affair. Pretending became second nature after a few weeks, despite the fact that it was difficult at first. At the same time that I was smiling affectionately at her, I was silently fuming at the idea that she was talking to another man. I suppose that I failed to fulfill my actual potential as an actor. In the course of this period, I made use of one of the disposable phones that I had purchased in order to get in touch with some old pals. I made sure that there would be no connection back to me. One of my first calls was to a friend from college whom I hadn't communicated with in more than 14 years. During that time period, Steve was a true party animal, the individual to whom one should go in order to have a nice time. "What's up, Tank? How have you been so far?" When Steve originally tried to recall, he was unable to do so, but after some time spent thinking back on our college parties, he finally understood. "What's up, Hank?" "Yes, I'm starting to get it all back together now. Didn't you think those were some fun times? Can you tell me about your recent activities?" I did not waste any time in updating him on my activities since I graduated from college. He disclosed that things had not quite transpired in the manner that he had hoped, but he is continuing to hold on to hope. What exactly is the cause for this phone call? It wasn't simply about looking back on the past. I had to exercise caution in order to avoid bringing up the actual problem. Therefore, I proposed that we meet in person. I am in need of some assistance, and I was thinking that you would be the right person for the task. Let's talk about it while we eat lunch together, shall we? After a brief period of hesitation, he finally gave his assent and stated, "Sure thing, I'll do anything for an old college friend." A few days later, we decided to meet in a location that was not close to my place of employment but was close to his. In light of the fact that time was running out, and I had no other option but to rely on his assistance, I was truly counting on his assistance. In addition, I would install cameras and bugs in the living room and bedroom, as I believed that these were the areas where they would most likely be talking and engaging in other activities. When the first week was over, on the tapes, there was nothing of significance that was found. I began to speculate that perhaps they were meeting at his apartment, since it would be less dangerous for them to continue their affair there. Nevertheless, the following week revealed a different narrative. It seemed as though she had brought Gary over to our apartment one late morning, and the two of them had spent more than 2 hours engaging in intense physical contact in every conceivable fashion. I had no choice but to put up with it because I was curious about whether or not they would talk about their journey or give any information that could be helpful to me. But they did not. When I checked the cameras once more the next week, I discovered that they had returned, but this time they were not for intimacy. A conversation concerning their future trip was just had by them. The flight number and the departure time were the pieces of information that I required. As they planned, I was able to hear the excitement in my wife's voice as I listened in on the conversation. I was so racked with rage that I even entertained the idea of hurting them. But I forced myself to ignore that idea. For a very long time, I desired for both of them to endure pain. They were going to be haunted by this vengeance for the rest of their lives, even into their graves. I pictured a scenario in which my soon-to-be ex-wife, who was rather elderly and gray in appearance, was lying on her deathbed. I would come in with a smile on my face and lean over to tell her how I had wrecked her trip to Hawaii. I would get to my feet, give her a grin while she looked at me in astonishment, and then I would turn around and leave. I was more driven than ever before to achieve success, but there was still one perilous action that I needed to complete. At long last, I was able to acquire additional information regarding Gary. Personal trainers are employed at the same health club, and both he and my wife are employed there. It has come to light that he has a pattern of seeking the wives of other men, but this pattern is set to experience a hard patch. I made the decision to do some surveillance, because he lives in a tiny condo complex that is located close to the club. I told my supervisor that I needed to take the day off from work since I had some personal affairs to take care of before we went on our business trip. Over the course of several hours, I scrutinized his location using a digital camera that has a powerful zoom feature. It was a little apartment complex with 2 bedrooms, and it appeared that his neighbors were absent throughout the day for work. Furthermore, there were no security cameras in the area. My secret preparations were successful as a result of this. I was feeling apprehensive about the questions that I needed to ask Steve while we were doing our meeting. This was the most dangerous aspect of my strategy, but if I was able to acquire what I required, it would be well worth the risk. When I turned around and saw Steve walking into the restaurant, I motioned for him to come over to the table where I was sitting. The restaurant was nestled away in the back, and there were only a few people who were eating their late lunch there. The atmosphere was relatively peaceful. A casual long time no see, bro greeting was his way of saying hello to me as he approached. I did not spend any time and went directly to the question at hand. Steve appeared to be in such a state of disrepair that he could have been an extra on the Walking Dead television show. My intention was to make it brief. If he was unable to aid me, I would have to look for assistance from other sources. We enjoyed reminiscing about our time spent in college and the unforgettable parties that Steve used to organize. In the past, he was known to be quite the party animal, however. It appeared that this behavior had adversely affected him. In comparison to his true age, he appeared to be at least 15 years older than he actually was. I needed to get to the point, so I asked him straight why I had invited him. I wanted to find out whether he or someone he knew might assist me in acquiring some party favors for a private event that I was planned. I handed him a list and inquired as to whether or not he couldn't help me. I gave him my word that I would compensate him for his assistance. Steve gave the list a quick glance, and at first he appeared astonished. However, he quickly broke into a grin. After a moment of hesitation, he gave his consent to assist, stating that it seemed like an amazing party. He also inquired about the possibility of bringing along an old friend from college. I accepted, feeling relieved, as long as he could provide me with the items that were on the list. I assured him that I would deliver the party details as soon as he had everything in his possession. I gave Steve an envelope that contained many $1,000s because he required that I pay for the products in advance with cash. It was established that the amount of cash was more than sufficient, and he made a comment about the size of the celebration. For the purpose of the exchange, we decided to meet the following week, and I provided him with my new mobile phone number in case there were any problems. After we had finished settling everything, we exited the restaurant. Due to the fact that my wife and her lover were scheduled to leave the day after I left for my trip, it was extremely important that everything go off without a hitch. During our meeting, which took place 2 weeks before I was scheduled to leave, Steve was able to acquire everything that I required. All that was required of me was to conceal these objects till when the timing was just right. I got out of work early 3 days before my trip and checked the packed suitcase that my wife had brought with her. For the woman who had cheated, everything was prepared for her vacation. As a farewell gift, I carefully tucked a few surprises inside her bag. I did this with great care. During the process of packing or unpacking, I made sure to conceal them in a way that would prevent her from finding them. I had no intention of her discovering them in the first place. Afterwards, I took another risky move by breaking into Gary's place of residence instead. That wasn't a problem for me because I was aware of his work schedule. Nevertheless, I had never before attempted anything even quite like to this. In addition to learning from a book that I discovered online, I purchased a lockpick set. Amazing things can be purchased through the use of the internet. When I was at home and at work, I practiced on a variety of locks. As a result, I grew fairly proficient in it. It was with a sense of self-assurance that I informed my supervisor that I required a longer lunch break, and then I went to Gary's condo with my lockpick set. I was taken aback by how quickly I was able to pick the lock, and I was able to enter his house in approximately 1 minute and 13 seconds. I was particularly concerned with speed since I wanted to carry out my plan as quickly as possible while leaving no trace behind. After donning gloves made of rubber, I made my way straight to his bedroom, where I discovered his packed luggage, which was prepared for the journey. In the same way that I did with my wife's suitcase, I put a few travel items to his bag in order to make their trip experience more memorable. Following that, I got up and walked to the kitchen, where I discovered a can of coffee. I made sure that everything appeared to be in its original state by emptying the coffee into a mixing bowl, placing some packets at the bottom of the can, refilling the can with coffee, and then returning it to the location where I had discovered it. I left Gary's property and went back to my own house after putting everything back in its proper place. To add insult to injury, I had one more item to complete. I reached out to a buddy who had a cousin who worked for the Transportation Security Administration (TSA) at the airport a few days before my trip. The flight that my wife and Gary were taking was not a mystery to me at all. At this point, It was necessary to convey this information to the appropriate individual without divulging its origin. Consequently, I reached out to my acquaintance, but I had to be careful about the manner in which I stated where I obtained the information. I remarked to Jack, "I need a favor, but I ask that you keep this information confidential in addition to providing him with the flight information in Gary's name." I did not mention my wife's name. Jack gave his word that he would pass it on anonymously to his cousin. Additionally, I eliminated all of the cameras and bugs so that no one would be able to locate them. Kathy's problems were made even worse by the fact that I had placed some surprises in her car. One day before I was to leave for my trip, I made the decision to have some fun at the cost of my wife. When I arrived home from work, I sat down and appeared to be in a bad mood. My wife took note and inquired about it. "What exactly is the matter? It seems like something occurred at work today." As you could expect, the clients who were meant to meet with us decided to cancel the meetings. In light of this, I joked that I would not be able to go on that trip, and that the company would be missing out on a significant potential for expansion. I noticed the look of surprise and concern on her face. The realization dawned on me at that moment that she was most likely plotting to get me out of town, so that she and Gary could go on their vacation to Hawaii. It would be helpful if they could still send you to try to make things better with those customers. A significant amount of time and effort has been invested in this project by you and your team. According to what she said, it would be a terrible thing to have all of that effort go to waste. Attempting to make me feel guilty. That infuriated me to no end. Since she did not feel any shame, how could she possibly talk about it? Her and Gary were ready to make a great deal of money. I laughed and reassured her. "I'm just kidding, honey," as I laughed. "No need to worry, the vacation is still scheduled." The expression of relief spread across her face, and she smiled. "You had me going there for a second, so may I ask if you are all packed?" "That's right. All I need to do is throw a few items into my carry-on bag and I'll be good to go." "Are you sure that you won't miss me too? Much while I'm away? Will you be making any plans? What about a night out with the gals or something?" "I'll just be here, waiting for my dear hubby to come back," she said. God, I almost burst out laughing at that, but I was too mad. The next day, my wife drove me to the airport and dropped me off. I gave her a long, passionate kiss, my hands caressing her sweet face. It would be the last kiss I'd ever give her, so I wanted it to be memorable. I joined the rest of the group, and we boarded the flight. It was a smooth ride, and once we landed and checked into the hotel, I called home, using the hotel room phone. No one picked up, so I left a message. "Honey, I did something dumb. I left my phone in the cab and won't be able to call you until I get it back or get a new one. If you need me, leave a message at the front desk, and I'll call you later." I hadn't actually forgotten my phone, I just needed an excuse not to take her calls. The next day arrived, and I made sure to turn off my phone. I wouldn't be disturbed during my meetings with clients. When I got back to my hotel room, I checked for messages, but there were none. So I turned on my phone and found no messages from my wife or anyone else. Well, maybe they managed to pass through airport security. The following day, the meetings went even better than the first ones, and we returned to the hotel early. There were several messages waiting for me on the hotel room phone. One was from my wife, another from her father, and the third from a DEA agent, which made me smile. I then checked my cell phone and saw several messages waiting for me. I listened to the messages on the hotel phone. The first was from my wife, and she was crying. "Baby, it's me. I'm in big trouble and I really need you. Please come home now. Please." After that, all I heard was crying. The next message was from my soon-to-be ex-father-in-law. "Hank, your wife has been trying to get in touch with you. She's been arrested and needs you home now. Please give me a call when you have a chance." The final message was from a DEA agent named DeFranco. He identified himself as Agent DeFranco and wanted to discuss my wife's arrest on pills charges. He provided his contact information and some other details. I was thrilled and couldn't stop smiling, but I had to maintain serious demeanor around my colleagues. Everything had gone according to plan so far, but I still needed to act surprised and shocked to avoid suspicion that I was involved. The next morning, I contacted my boss and informed him of a serious family issue without providing specifics. He agreed to let me leave the meetings temporarily to handle the emergency, but stressed the importance of returning promptly to finalize deals with the clients. I caught the first flight back home, and upon landing, I retrieved my lost cell phone and called my father-in-law. "What's happening? I received your message, but I can't believe it. She does not use any substance. Did this happen at the health club?" I knew exactly where the incident occurred. No, she was traveling with a friend to Hawaii and they were stopped at security where they found some illegal things on her and her friend. Her father said in a low voice, sounding embarrassed. "Hold on a second. Just hold on. She told me she was going to be home and didn't have any plans. Who was this friend she was going to Hawaii with? I bet one of her girlfriends talked her into going and got her into all this mess, I replied. Her father hesitated for a moment. I know it was with someone else. The important thing to remember here, Hank, is that she's in trouble and needs your help. She loves you. And I know you love her too, he said. I halted him in his talk. What exactly are you withholding from me, Dad? Is it known who she was traveling with? I yelled into the phone, feeling a little too content with the situation. The silence continued for a moment until he cleared his throat. During her trip, she was accompanied by a male, possibly Gary. He confirmed that he, too, had been taken into custody. At this point, I interrupted him once more. During the time that I was out working hard to earn a living, you are telling me that my wife, who is also your daughter, was traveling to Hawaii with another romantic partner. And she is arrested for possessing a controlled substance. Is that what you're trying to convey to him? I made a demand. What he said in response was, yes, I'm afraid that's what I'm telling you. My silence was somewhat lengthy. It's okay. I have to go to her attorney, and then I have to talk to this DEA agent. On top of that, I'm going to have a conversation with her. I thought to myself, she had better have a damn good explanation for why she was about to go to Hawaii with another man and had substance with her. We'll see what happens next. But she had better have a decent answer already. I ended the call with her father before he had a chance to answer. I noticed that there were more than 20 messages waiting for me when I came home, and I immediately started playing them again. Initially, I was the one who reported that I had misplaced my mobile phone. Following that, Kathy sent me a few messages, expressing her hope that I would check our messages while I was away on business. I received a few messages from her father, and the remaining ones were from her attorney, who requested that I get in touch with them as soon as possible. After making a phone call to the attorney, I was able to schedule a meeting for the following morning because he was not present in the office at that time. The following step was for me to call the DEA agent DeFranco and make arrangements to meet him at his office in the downtown area later that afternoon. After rapidly getting cleaned up, I made my way out of the room while simultaneously attempting to determine whether or not I had hidden my tracks so that none of this could be traced back to me. Nearly. I was taken into what I can only imagine was a room for interrogation when I found myself there. A folder was carried by Agent DeFranco as he entered the room. He expressed his happiness that you were able to visit and see me. He looked at something in the folder and remarked, I have some questions about your wife that I was hoping you could answer. He was referring to the topic of his wife. I want you to know that my wife does not engage in substance use. For as long as I've known her, she has never obtained anything that is against the law. To tell you the truth, she doesn't even drink that regularly. It is clear that there is a significant misunderstanding or error here. For crying out loud, she makes her living as a yoga instructor. There is no need for her to be associated with unlawful activities. My attempt to put on an act was unsuccessful since Agent DeFranco did not glance up. A wide variety of foolish decisions are made by individuals for a wide variety of foolish reasons. Do you know that your wife was heading to Hawaii with this person, Gary? Did you make that discovery? However, Gary maintains that they were going on a romantic retreat, despite the fact that she told us that he was just a buddy. Who is Gary, if you know him? In the event that your wife was having an affair, were you aware of it? Regarding the chemical, did you have any clue what it was? He was now staring at me with a really deep gaze. In order to regain my composure, I took a big breath. After having a conversation with my father-in-law this morning, I became aware of all of this information. However, I still find it hard to believe. This must have been a result of her being influenced. Her character is far too admirable for her to become involved in something of this nature. I didn't want to go beyond what was reasonable. I had a feeling that this individual could tell a liar from a mile away, so I had to proceed with caution. Well, I suppose you were unaware of it. I'm sorry to be the one to break it to you, friend, but your wife was cheating on you with a person who was selling illegal substances. In addition to the pills that we discovered during our search of his residence, we will shortly be doing a search of your residence as well. You have the option of not just cooperating and allowing us to enter, but also obtaining a search warrant. In any case, we will be searching your location in the near future. I was aware that her attorney would counsel me against doing so, but I was motivated to protect myself, and it would be more aesthetically pleasing if I did not attempt to conceal anything. As a result, I gave my consent, and before I knew it, I was back at the house with a large number of DEA and FBI officers, along with a couple of their dogs, going over everything. They stole a few items, one of which being a jar of pills that she had stored in the medicine cabinet. In the conference that I had with Kathy's attorney the next day, I provided him with an update on my conversation with DeFranco as well as the search. It did not make him happy. My goal is to be present in the event that you are approached by any member of law enforcement before you make any statements. Is that clear? I gave a slight nod, feeling annoyed. Please allow me to clarify, I told him. I am interested in learning everything that led to the arrest of my wife. What I do know is that she was preparing to embark on a trip to Hawaii with this guy named Gary. Should either of you require my assistance, someone ought to initiate the process of explaining how this transpired. Are I able to make myself heard? He said, I am unable to discuss the situation with you regarding your wife. It was at that moment that I left. Following that, I went to the penitentiary, where she was being housed, and made a request to see her. When she entered the room, she was surrounded by other inmates who were meeting with their families or attorneys at round metal tables with bolted-down stools. Her hair was pulled back into a tight, messy ponytail, and she was wearing an orange jail uniform. She did not have any makeup on. The way she looked was one of exhaustion, as if she hadn't slept in days. She broke down in tears and said, "Oh, baby, I'm so relieved he's here. I had every intention of giving her a hug, but a security guy stopped me and told me that there must be no physical contact. This just served to make her cry even more. Please don't worry, honey. We'll figure out how to fix this issue. I am in desperate need of hearing your side of the story right now. You are going to embark on a trip to Hawaii with this guy. How did it happen?" I inquired in a composed manner. Her tears deepened further. "It's Hank. I truly apologize. I am just so sorry. This is not a lie. You were having an affair with this individual named Gary, who was selling medications. How could you possibly do that? Have you not been satisfied with me? You don't love me, do you? With him, with you, and with the medications? I just don't get it. In what way were you thinking?" Knowing that she did not have an answer, I hesitated for a moment. "Kindly trust me when I say that I have loved you from the beginning. Are you able to forgive me?" It was her pleading with me. After looking at her for a long, I finally spoke up and said, "While it's possible that I could have forgiven you, you have completely broken my heart. Thus, I am unable to forgive you. I am going to change all of the locks on the house and hire a divorce attorney before I leave this place. Because I want to remove all traces of you from my house. I am shipping all of your belongings to your parents' house. You are no longer a part of my life. Please don't come into contact with me in any way. In addition, I would want to state that your attorney should not utilize me as a character witness, because I will not say anything positive about you. I will miss you, Kathy. My best wishes are with you." While she was crying and pleading with me to stay, she stated that she required my presence. Without turning around, I made my way back to the house and started out by packing her items. The following day, I made arrangements to have a locksmith change all of the locks. A security company was going to install a system of superior quality the following week, and I scheduled it. After only a few days, I was able to pack the majority of her belongings and get them ready to be sent to her parents' home. Kathy had called me multiple times, but I chose to ignore each and every one of them. I had absolutely no desire to engage in conversation with her. In due time, I returned to my previous position, and we were able to successfully sign those significant clients that we had been pursuing. My income was increased as a result of this, and I was promoted. Kathy's divorce went down without a hitch. It was a straightforward division with no spousal support, and she was required to pay her own legal bills as a result of her arrest for possession of pills. I desired to maintain a certain distance. She did not go to trial because there was an overwhelming amount of evidence, and her attorney suggested that she accept a plea deal in order to receive a reduced sentence. It did not make her happy. In contrast, Gary put out a valiant effort to demonstrate his innocence, yet he was ultimately sentenced to 15 years in prison, while Kathy was given only 5 years. On the day that Kathy was scheduled to be sentenced, she expressed her desire to meet with me for the final time before she went to court. I concurred, and we planned to meet at the office of her attorney 1 hour prior to her scheduled court appearance. At the moment when she looked at me, she appeared to be crying. "I simply wanted to let you know, Hank, that Gary was not important to me in any way. It has always been you that I have loved, and I will continue to love you. It is my deepest regret that I have caused you such pain. It was not intended for things to go in this direction. I hope you can forgive me someday," she said, almost in tears again. "Kathy, I need to understand one thing. Why did you do it? Were you bored? Did I not satisfy you in bed? Was it the thrill of doing something wrong and getting away with it? What was it that led you to do this and ruin our marriage?" I asked with sadness. She looked at me. "I honestly don't know why. Maybe it was the excitement of doing something forbidden. I've always loved you. I guess you didn't love me enough, or else you wouldn't have done this," she replied. "I really hope that this is the last time that I have to take care of you, Kathy. Any time in the future. I do not wish to see or communicate with you. I would like for you to spend your time behind bars reflecting on the things you have lost as a result of your desire for something exciting. I bet you'll have some thrilling experiences in there." Once those ladies noticed you, she began crying again, but this time out of fear. Over the next few years, the company grew, and I climbed up to become a VP. We expanded our business, opening an office in New York, and I was selected to lead it. This meant selling my house, moving to Manhattan, and getting an apartment. I received a few letters from Kathy early on, but I sent them back without opening. That part of my life was over, and I was ready to move forward. It's been 7 years now, and life in New York has been good. I'm still single, and the dating scene in New York is treating me well. I was still single, dating a different woman every few months. I had no interest in getting married again and risking betrayal. Once was more than enough. While sitting in my office, I got a call from the lobby, and my assistant Amy came in. She said there's a woman downstairs who wants to speak with me. She claims her name is Kathy. I paused for a moment, then told her to send Kathy up but to have 2 security guards nearby. I also gave Amy something to do for me. I wrote it down and handed it to her. "Call me a few minutes after you bring her in," I said. Amy read what I wrote and smiled. A few minutes later, Kathy was in my office. She looked at least 10 years older and had gained some weight, not in a flattering way. Her once beautiful long brown hair now showed some gray and was frayed. I noticed the bags under her sad-looking eyes. Her clothes were stylish but conservative and seemed a bit outdated. I looked at her, feeling nothing, no love, no hate, not even pity. I was just emotionally empty. "So, Kathy, what brings you here?" "Hank, I was hoping to talk to you." I felt the urge to explain what happened to me. Honestly, I had no clue about the substance, and I still don't know how they ended up in my bags. Gary must have sneaked them in without my knowledge. I'm not into substance, never have been. Please believe me, I'm begging you. Kathy pleaded with me. "Kathy, you destroyed our marriage for a fling and made our whole relationship a lie. Why should I trust you now? Why did you go out of your way to find me just to tell me another lie? You don't get it. I love you. I still do. I want us to be together again. I want to make things right." Just then, my desk phone rang and I put it on speaker. "Yes, Amy, what's up?" "Stacy called to confirm that you should get 4 tickets for the opening as her parents are coming into town and then want to meet you. Let her know that I'll buy 4 tickets. Find out where her parents are staying. I want to send her mother a dozen roses." I ended the call and looked back at Kathy. "You were saying?" Kathy was on the verge of tears. "Who's Stacy?" "Oh, she's just someone I've been seeing lately, but you're not here to talk about my dating life. You mentioned you still have feelings for me. While I appreciate that, I want to make it clear that I don't feel the same way about you anymore. At the end of the day, your dad informed me about your arrest and your plan to go to Hawaii with Gary. When your affair came to light, I was done with our relationship. Now please go. I don't want to see you again. Do you understand?" I listened carefully, but I had nothing to do with those pills they found. I was framed. "Enough with your lies, Kathy. You cheated on me before, and you're still lying now. Please leave and don't come back. I've told security to have you arrested if you return. Do you understand?" She was crying silently, but she nodded. I escorted her to the door, and the security guards escorted her out. Amy came in afterward. "What was that all about?" "That was just me saying goodbye to a chapter of my life.